You are holding a silver platter. Your hands are shaking. The emperor notices. He does not speak. He signals to the guard behind you. Your wrists are grabbed. The platter hits marble and shatters. They drag you 3 steps to the brazier burning in the corner. Your hands are forced palms down onto the coals. You cannot scream. Screaming makes it worse. The other servants keep working around you. They pretend this is not happening because it is not. Punishment. This is what Roman emperors did to their servants. And the systematic cruelty I am about to show you reveals something about power that no battle ever could. Before I show you what emperors did to them, you need to understand what servants were. Not employees, not even regular slaves. Something worse. The imperial household had 3 tiers. At the top, the cubiculari. These were personal body slaves. They dressed the emperor. They bathed him. They stood inches from his skin every single day. Then came the procurator. These were household administrators. They ran the palace machinery, managed schedules, controlled access. At the bottom, the disposable masses, the ones who cleaned, cooked, and carried. The ones with no names and any record. Regular slaves throughout Rome had one master. Imperial servants had a master who was worshipped as divine. There was no appeals process, no protection under law, no witnesses who would dare testify. The palace was a closed system where normal Roman law simply did not apply. Here is the detail. That makes it worse. Imperial servants often came from noble families. Conquered kings sent their children. Political prisoners had their offspring taken. Hostages from defeated territories ended up in imperial service. This was not random cruelty to strangers. Emperors specifically chose people who remembered being powerful. People who once had status, dignity, freedom. The psychological warfare was intentional from the start. When you own someone who used to give orders, breaking them became entertainment. When you controlled someone who once controlled others, humiliation carried extra weight. This was the foundation of the system, and the system had no checks. An emperor could not be prosecuted. He could not be sued. He could not even be questioned. What happened inside palace walls stayed inside palace walls. Servants who entered rarely left. And when they did leave, it was usually through disposal channels I will describe later. The law was clear on this point. The emperor owned imperial property. Servants were imperial property. Therefore, whatever happened to them was legally his business alone. Rome built an empire on conquest and law. But inside the palace, law stopped at the door. Only will mattered. And when one person's will is absolute, when human beings become property with no witnesses who matter, this is what happens. Commodus woke around dawn each day. His servants had been awake for 3 hours already. Water temperature had to be exact. Food arrangement had to be precise. Clothing had to be laid out in perfect order. One mistake had consequences. The incident Cassius Dio records happened on an ordinary morning. A servant brought breakfast olives. They were slightly warm, not chilled enough. Commodus did not yell, did not even raise his voice. He calmly ordered the servants' hands placed on hot coals. Not a quick touch. The guards held them there. Flesh bubbled, skin blackened. The servant had to stand silently while this happened. Screaming meant worse punishment. The other servants continued working around this scene. They set down bread. They poured wine. They pretended nothing was happening 3 feet away. This same servant, hands now ruined, was still required to serve. He could not hold things properly anymore. His fingers would not close right. 3 days later, he dropped a cup. It shattered on marble. Commodus looked at him, then looked at the guards. They took him to the private menagerie, not the Colosseum. That would be too public, too honorable. The basement of the palace had exotic animals, lions, leopards, bears, collected from across the empire. The servant was fed to them, alive, down where no one would remember him, down where his screaming could not be heard. Dio records this was not unusual. The word he uses is frequently. This happened frequently. Commodus kept detailed records of which animals consumed which servants. He treated it like a hobby, like a collection. He would show guests around his menagerie and point. That leopard ate 3 servants last month. This bear has the record. 5 in 1 season. Think about what this means. There was a ledger somewhere. A palace accountant sat down. With ink and parchment, he wrote names in one column, dates in another. Methods of disposal in a third. Cause of death. Drop cup. Cause of death. Water too warm. Cause of death. Looked at emperor. Wrong. The banality of it is what makes it monstrous. This was not frenzied rage, not heat of the moment violence. This was administrative. This was bureaucracy. Someone filed these reports. Someone kept these records. Someone replaced the servants like replacing broken furniture. And here is what nobody tells you about Commodus. He was not insane. He was not possessed. He was not some aberration that could not be explained. He was a man with absolute power who faced zero consequences. That is all it took. The servants who survived learned the rules quickly. Do not make mistakes, but also do not be too perfect. Being too good at your job drew attention. Being noticed was dangerous. The safest position was invisible competence. Good enough to avoid punishment. Not good enough to be remembered. Except that did not always work either. Because sometimes Commodus killed servants for no reason at all. Just bored, just curious what would happen. Just because he could. Dio records an incident where Commodus had a servant executed simply to see if other servants would react. It was an experiment, a test. How much fear can I create? How total is my control? The servant who was taken had done nothing wrong. Everyone knew it. He was pulled from the line during morning duties. He was killed in front of the others, and the remaining servants had to continue serving breakfast. Had to act like they had not. Just watch their colleague destroyed for entertainment. That was the lesson. Your behavior does not matter. Your perfection does not save you. Your invisibility does not protect you. You exist at the whim of someone who views you as less than human. And that knowledge, that bone-deep certainty that nothing you do matters, that is its own form of torture. We are only starting. This was daily routine under one emperor. Wait until you see what happened when emperors got creative. Elagabalus became emperor at 14 years old. A teenage brain given absolute power surrounded by servants who had to obey everything. The Historia Augusta records what happened next. He designed a special banquet room. The ceiling was false. Above it, a hollow space. He filled that space with rose petals. Tons of them. During dinner parties, he would release them onto guests and servants. Below, it sounds beautiful at first, romantic even. Rose petals falling like snow. But he did not stop releasing them. The petals kept coming. They piled up. Rose petals are individually light. In mass, they are suffocating weight. The servants below were trapped. They could not leave their posts. Leaving meant execution. So they stood there as petals buried them. First to their knees, then their waists, then their chests. The petals compressed. They became dense, heavy. Breathing became difficult, then impossible. Above, the emperor and his guests laughed. They could hear muffled, struggling through the flowers. The entertainment lasted 20 to 30 minutes. That is how long it took for the servants to stop moving, to stop making sounds. The bodies were not removed until the banquet ended. Sometimes hours later, he invented mechanical dining couches. They looked normal. Guests reclined on them. Servants stood behind, but hidden inside were release mechanisms. Mid-dinner, Elagabalus would trigger them. The couch collapsed backward. It crushed the servant against the wall. The guest would roll off, startled but unharmed. The servant would be pinned, ribs broken, internal bleeding, slowly dying. The other guests continued eating. The meal went on for hours. The servant stayed trapped, stayed dying. Nobody helped. Nobody looked. The body was removed only when dinner ended, when guests left, when the room needed to be prepared for next time. Then there was the lottery system. Elagabalus created a game for his guests. He had a bowl filled with tiles. Some tiles had prizes written on them: gold, property, slaves of their own. Other tiles had punishments. But here's the twist. The guests drew the tiles. The servants received the punishments. A guest would draw a tile. It would say tongue removal. A random servant would be grabbed. His tongue would be cut out right there. While everyone watched. While dinner continued, the guests were forced into complicity. They pulled the tile. Their action caused the mutilation. Even though they did not choose it. Even though they did not want it, Elagabalus made them part of the machine. Servants stood along the walls during these dinners, watching the bowl, hoping their position was far enough away, knowing distance did not actually matter. When your tile was drawn, guards would find you. They always did. The Historia Augusta describes one specific lottery night. A guest drew a tile marked blinding. The nearest servant was a teenage boy, new to the palace. He had been there less than a month. The guards grabbed him. They held his head. They pushed heated irons into his eyes. The guest who drew the tile vomited. Elagabalus laughed at both of them. At the guest for being weak, at the servant for screaming. The boy lived. He was kept on staff. He served at subsequent dinners. Blind, bumping into furniture, dropping things he could not see. Each mistake earned him beatings. Why keep him? Why not just kill him? Because his presence reminded other servants what could happen. His stumbling, his injuries, his ruined life was walking propaganda. It was a message delivered fresh every single day. Here is what makes this specifically monstrous. Elagabalus removed cause and effect. Under Commodus, you could at least pretend that perfection might save you. Do everything right, maybe survive. But under Elagabalus, your survival had nothing to do with your actions. Perfect service meant you might still be chosen for the lottery. Flawless work meant you might still be under the rose petals. You could be the best servant in the palace, the most skilled, the most careful, and none of it mattered because the emperor was not punishing mistakes. He was entertaining himself. That is a different kind of terror. When punishment follows crime, humans can adapt. We learn the rules. We follow them. We create safety through compliance. But when violence is random, when cruelty is recreational, when your death might happen because a guest drew the wrong tile, there is no adaptation. There is only waiting. Every servant who survived his reign lived in constant free fall, never knowing when the floor would open, never able to trust that today would end like yesterday. The uncertainty was the torture, and we are only at the third emperor. It gets worse. Tiberius built a fortress on Capri, an island off the Italian coast. Remote, isolated, no senators allowed, no witnesses, no accountability. Dozens of personal servants lived there for years. They could not leave, could not send messages, could not communicate with the outside world. What happened on that island stayed on that island until decades later when Suetonius wrote it down. Tiberius loved swimming in natural grow caves where water was calm and private. Servants had to swim with him, attend him in the water. One servant accidentally touched the emperor while swimming, just a brush of hands, reaching for the same rock. Tiberius said nothing in the moment, did not react. They finished swimming. The servant thought maybe he had not noticed. Days passed. 5 days of normal routine. The servant started to relax, started to think he was safe. On the 6th day, guards came. They took the servant to a cliff face hundreds of feet above the ocean. They forced him to jump. He had no choice. Jump or be thrown. He jumped. In the water below, guards waited in boats. Not to rescue, to finish. As the servant surfaced, they beat him with oars. They held him under. They made sure he drowned. The other servants were forced to watch from the cliff. Forced to see what happened when you made mistakes, even accidental ones. Even days later, the message was clear. You are never safe. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. Tiberius had a personal astrologer. The astrologer had a young assistant. One day, the astrologer predicted something Tiberius disliked. The details do not matter. What matters is what happened next. Tiberius had the assistant brought to a terrace edge. Hundreds of feet of empty air behind him. Tiberius asked him a question. What do you see in your own future? The assistant was terrified. He stammered out an answer. Long life. Caesar. Long service. Tiberius smiled. He said 2 words. Wrong prediction. The guards threw the assistant off the cliff. Tacitus records this. The astrologer was forced to watch. His assistant's body broke on the rocks below. Then Tiberius turned to the astrologer. He asked another question. What do you predict now? The astrologer gave the right answer. Whatever you wish, Caesar. He survived that day, but he knew the cost of every prediction afterward. One wrong word, one displeasing forecast. And he would follow his assistant down. Tiberius had servants memorize his daily schedule. Then he would randomly test them. He would grab a servant in the hallway, ask them questions. What did I eat for breakfast 6 days ago? Who attended me in the bath last Thursday? What time did I wake yesterday? Wrong answers earned flogging. But here is the impossible part. Tiberius would deliberately misremember. A servant would give the correct answer. Tiberius would claim it was wrong. The servant would be punished for contradicting him, for calling the emperor a liar, even though the servant was right. Truth became whatever Tiberius said it was. Reality bent around his word. There was no objective fact, no shared memory, only his version. In disagreeing with his version, even silently, even in your own head, was treason. The lower levels of the Capri Villa had soundproofed rooms. Suetonius references them as secret chambers. Servants were taken there, not for execution, for experimentation. Tiberius wanted to understand pain, wanted to measure it, wanted to know how long different methods took to produce screaming. He kept records. How many minutes until this torture broke someone? How many hours until that one did? He documented the results. Not for any purpose, not for military intelligence or medical knowledge, just curiosity, just because he could. Servants who survived were brought back to regular duties. They had to serve dinner to the emperor who tortured them. They had to stand behind his chair, pour his wine, pretend their hands were not still shaking, pretend their wounds were not still fresh. The other servants had to pretend not to notice, could not ask what happened, could not offer comfort. Because acknowledging the torture meant acknowledging it existed, and acknowledging it existed might make you next. So everyone pretended. Everyone acted like the screaming from below did not happen. Like the injured servants were not injured. Like the fear in the air was not real. That might be the worst part. Not the torture itself. The mandatory pretending afterward. The forced normally. The performance of everything being fine when everyone knew nothing was fine. That cognitive dissonance. That constant mental splitting, that is its own form of destruction. You could not trust your own eyes, your own ears, your own experience. Because if you admitted what you saw, what you heard, what you experienced, you became a problem. And problems got taken to the lower levels. So you learned to unsee, to unhear, to unremember. You learned to exist in two realities simultaneously. The reality where servants were being tortured in the basement and the reality where nothing unusual was happening. You had to believe both. Had to live both. Had to never let them touch. That split, maintained for months or years, breaks something in the human mind. Something that does not heal. Even if you survive, even if you eventually leave, the fracture remains. Tiberius ruled for 23 years. 23 years of this on an island with no escape. And when he finally died, the servants who survived were not freed. They were transferred, sent to the next emperor who had his own methods, his own innovations, his own contributions to the machine. The mission trusted no one. He ruled from 81 to 96 AD. 15 years of systematic paranoia turned into imperial policy. He created an informant network among his own servants. Servants spying on other servants. Report suspicious behavior. Get rewards. Fail to report. Get executed for complicity. Nobody could be trusted. Your closest friend might be reporting you. Your bunkmate might be an informant. That person you shared meals with for years might be building a case against you. Every conversation was dangerous. Every private moment was potentially witnessed. Suetonius records that Diane lined palace corridors with polished moonstone. It acted like mirrors, distorted but reflective. He could see behind him while walking, could watch servants' faces when they thought he was not looking. Your expression when the emperor's back was turned mattered as much as your expression to his face, maybe more. Because your unguarded face revealed truth, and truth was dangerous. Servants learned to control their faces constantly, every moment, every hour, every day. Never relax. Never let genuine emotion show, because genuine emotion might be the wrong emotion. And the wrong emotion meant death. The mission became convinced servants were plotting. Whether they actually were does not matter. He believed it, and belief became policy. He started randomly executing 2 or 3 servants per week. No trial, no accusation, no specific charge, just gone one day. The randomness was the point. If executions followed patterns, people could avoid the pattern, could stay safe by following rules. But when death was random, when anyone could be next for no reason, safety became impossible. Servants started avoiding each other. Friendship looked like conspiracy. Talking privately looked like plotting. Helping each other looked like alliance building. So, everyone isolated. Everyone stayed alone because alone meant fewer connections. Fewer connections meant fewer accusations. The palace became full of people who worked side by side but never spoke, who slept in the same rooms but never conversed, who shared space but not words. The silence was enforced by terror, and the silence made everything worse. There was a steward named Stephanus. He managed household accounts. Domitian accused him of embezzlement. The accusation was probably false, but truth did not matter. What mattered was what happened next. Domitian did not execute him. That would be too quick, too merciful. Instead, he forced Stephanus to continue serving while under investigation. The investigation lasted months. Every single day, Stephanus woke not knowing if today was execution day. Every morning could be his last. Every time guards approached could be the end. Every summons to the emperor's presence could be the final one. That uncertainty sustained for months is its own torture, worse than execution. Because execution ends, waiting does not. Stephanus eventually broke. He helped assassinate Domitian, but Stephanus also died in the attack, meaning he chose death over one more day of waiting. Chose guaranteed death over possible death because the uncertainty was worse than any certainty. Domitian once hosted a dinner party that became legendary. The room was decorated entirely in black. Walls, floors, ceiling, all black. Behind each servant, he placed a grave marker, stone tombstones with their names carved on them. The servants worked all evening standing next to their own graves. Constant reminder, you are already dead. You just do not know when. Every plate they served, every cup they poured, their name in stone behind them. At the end of the night, none were executed. The mission sent them back to quarters, back to regular duties. Like nothing happened. But the message was delivered. You were alive at my discretion. Your grave is already prepared. I am just deciding when to use it. The next day, those same servants had to work normally. Had to pretend the previous night did not happen. Had to serve breakfast with steady hands. Had to act like they had not spent hours staring at their own tombstones. This was Domitian's innovation. Not killing people. Making them live as if already dead. Making them exist in the space between life and death where you are still breathing but already buried. Still moving but already a corpse. The fear was total. It was everywhere. It was everyone. You could not trust your colleagues. Could not trust your friends. Could not trust your own face in the mirror. Could not trust that tomorrow would come. Could not trust that today would end. Some servants broke mentally, started talking to themselves, started seeing threats that were not there, started acting exactly like the conspirators Domitian imagined, not because they were plotting, because the constant fear drove them toward the behavior they were accused of. Domitian created the enemy. He feared. By treating everyone like a threat, he made everyone threatened. And threatened people become dangerous. Not because they want to, because they have to, because survival demands it. When Domitian was finally killed, the servants did not mourn, but they did not celebrate either. Because they knew the system survived. The next emperor would have his own methods, his own fears, his own ways of making servants wish they were dead. The machine kept running. It always did. Emperors killed servants regularly. Bodies had to go somewhere. The palace had dedicated systems for this, not improvised, not chaotic, organized, planned, built into the infrastructure itself. Many bodies went into the Tiber River at night. There was a specific dock area for disposal, not the public docks, not the commercial ones, a private section. Palace guards controlled access. Servants assigned to disposal detail brought bodies there after dark. They wrapped them in cloth, weighted them with stones, pushed them into the current. Think about being assigned to disposal detail. You are carrying someone you worked beside, someone you ate meals with, someone whose name you knew, and you know bone deep. That next month someone might be carrying you. The rotation was random. Everyone took turns. Everyone participated. Everyone became complicit. Some villas had quicklime pits on the grounds. Bodies went in. Within days, nothing remained. No bones, no evidence, no grave. The person simply ceased to exist. Quicklime dissolves everything. Flesh, bone, teeth, all of it. Family members, if they were free citizens, never knew what happened. One day, their relative worked at the palace. Next day, nothing. Nobody to bury. No funeral, no closure, just absence, just silence. And asking questions was dangerous. Made you look suspicious. Made you look like someone who needed watching. Imperial. Accountants tracked servant turnover in ledgers. The same ledgers that recorded grain supplies and military expenses. Servants were listed under attrition or wastage. Bureaucratic language for killing. They used the same terminology. For broken pottery and dead humans. Requisition forms exist in archaeological records. Requisitions for replacement servants. Need 12 new body slaves for next month. Need 8 kitchen workers. Need 6 cleaners. Listed like furniture, like tools, like anything else that wore out and needed replacing. The supply chain was established. Slave markets knew to keep certain types available. Young, healthy. No visible scars. Palace buyers came through regularly. They had quotas to fill, had positions to staff. Business was steady. The silent system was enforced absolutely. Surviving servants never spoke about missing colleagues. There was an unspoken rule. Pretend they never existed. Speaking a dead servant's name could get you killed because it meant you remembered. And remembering meant you were paying attention. And paying attention meant you might be a problem. Institutional amnesia was mandatory. Every servant learned this. Fast. Someone disappears. You forget them immediately. You do not ask where they went. You do not wonder what happened. You do not mention them ever again. Their bed gets filled by someone new. You do not tell the new person what happened to the old one. This was not chaos. This was system. This was infrastructure. This was Rome at its most efficient. The same organizational genius that built aqueducts and roads and conquered continents was applied to disposing of human beings. And it worked perfectly. The palace was the emperor's private domain. What happened inside was invisible to Rome. Senators saw the public emperor, the one who gave speeches, the one who attended theater, the one who performed rituals. They never saw the private monster. Never witnessed what happened behind closed doors. Servants, especially body slaves, never left palace grounds. They lived there, worked there, died there. They had no contact with the outside world. No way to send messages. No way to tell anyone what was happening, even if they wanted to, even if they were brave enough to try. The replacement pipeline was constant. New servants came from conquered territories, from political prisoners' families, from specific slave markets. There was always supply, always fresh victims who did not know what awaited them. By the time they realized, they were trapped. By the time they understood, escape was impossible. Legal immunity was absolute. The emperor was above all law. He technically owned all imperial servants. Roman law was clear on this. An owner could do anything to property, anything at all. No crime was committed legally speaking. No law was broken because the law said he could. Every free Roman benefited from the empire. Bread was subsidized. Entertainment was free. Aqueducts brought water. Roads connected cities. The entire population enjoyed the fruits of conquest. And all of it was funded by the same system, the same imperial machine. So it was easier to ignore what happened in the palace. Easier to pretend it was not real. Easier to look away. Collective willful ignorance became the norm. Everyone knew servants disappeared. Everyone knew the palace was dangerous. But nobody talked about it. Nobody acknowledged it because acknowledging it meant confronting it, and confronting it meant risking everything. Each emperor built on the previous one's methods. What shocked under Tiberius became normal under Domitian. What seemed extreme under Caligula became standard under Commodus. The baseline kept shifting. The acceptable kept expanding. Gradual desensitization across generations. By 200 AD, this was just how things were. The way things had always been. The way things would always be. Nobody questioned it anymore. Nobody even noticed it. The cruelty had become invisible through familiarity. The system had no external pressure. No foreign power could intervene. No domestic institution had authority to challenge the emperor. The Senate was powerless. The courts were controlled. The military followed orders. There were no checks, no balances, no mechanisms for accountability. And most importantly, nobody benefited from changing it. The emperors certainly did not want limits on their power. The palace administrators kept their positions by enabling the system. The Suppliers made money from constant turnover. The guards followed orders and collected pay. Free Romans enjoyed their subsidized lives. Everyone had a reason to keep things exactly as they were. That is how systems of horror become permanent. Not through active evil, through passive participation, through benefit and comfort, through looking away, through pretending not to know, through choosing silence over risk. The machine did not need support. It only needed the absence of opposition. And it got that in abundance. Thousands of servants disappeared across centuries. We do not know their names. They are not in history books. They have no graves, no monuments, no records beyond bureaucratic attrition numbers. They are invisible casualties of imperial power. Footnotes, statistics, nothing more. Return to the image from the beginning. Trembling hands holding a platter. We do not know that servant's name. We never will. And there were thousands just like them. Thousands who died for entertainment, for boredom, for nothing at all. The emperors came and went. Tiberius, Caligula, Nero, Domitian, Commodus, Elagabalus. Different men, different methods. But the machine of casual cruelty remained constant. It lasted over 400 years. It only ended when the empire collapsed entirely. Not from moral awakening, from logistical failure. Seneca watched this system operate. He wrote something that explains everything. Power shows what a man is. When one person is legally untouchable, when human beings become property, when there are no witnesses who matter, this is what humans do. Not aliens, not monsters, just humans with absolute power and zero consequences. Right now in Rome, there are archaeological sites where palaces once stood. Tourists take photos of columns and mosaics. Tour guides talk about architecture and grandeur. They describe the luxury, the wealth, the sophistication. But under those floors are bones. Bones of people whose names we will never know. People who died screaming for entertainment. And nobody wrote it down. Nobody thought it mattered enough to record. The emperors got statues. They got monuments. They got their names in every history book. Their lives were documented in detail. Their accomplishments were carved in stone. Their legacies were preserved for millennia. Their servants got quicklime pits and river currents. They got silence. They got eraser. They got nothing. That eraser is the final cruelty. Not just killing them, not just torturing them, making them disappear so